I'm excited about the topic. It seems that February, the topic of relationships, love, relationships, anything that has to do with relationships, especially this past week, dealing with toxic relationships. How do we deal with toxic relationships? I have received a lot of feedback, a lot of questions. So thank you for participating and for reaching out. And today we're going to dive a little bit more deeply into this topic of how do we get better at non-attachment. And by non-attachment, by detaching in a healthy, loving way, how do we create more compassion in our relationships? So this non-attachment subject is something that I have to tell you has really changed the quality of my relationships, of my life. Learning how to be more emotionally intelligent with my relationships and to develop more compassion. In a sense, this relationship with non-attachment is really about releasing our attachment to the outcome, to move away from our ego and to move more into a space of clarity, almost emptiness. Non-attachment to me also translates to a sense of healthy emptiness. And what I mean by that is to not show up in front of another, to another, with an expectation, with an assumption. So today I really took some time to clearly delineate these points for you in the hopes that it will be helpful. And so we have Sabi here. Good morning, good evening for you, Sabi. Thank you for being here from Montreuil, France. Awesome. I'm so happy that you're here. Let's just dive in. What do I mean by non-attachment in this scenario? And what I wrote last week in my newsletter was that at its core, non-attachment is about letting go of your emotional attachment to people, to things, to places, beliefs, releasing our attachment to beliefs and releasing our attachment to beliefs and situations. Non-attachment, you will not be surprised to hear that it's a mindfulness practice that helps us establish a baseline of peace and make the conscious choice to separate suffering from pain. We suffer when we lose what we're attached to. That makes sense, right? We suffer when we lose what we're attached to, or from the idea of losing what we're attached to. It's an ideology of what we're attached to, or in our efforts to hold on to what we're attached to. We were talking about grasping last week. So when we start to grasp, we get stuck in a space of not being able to let go. And that also creates suffering and pain. So there's fear, confusion, sadness, anger, grief, and disappointment that can arise from grasping, from holding on too tightly. We have all heard suffering is optional, pain is inevitable. And often pain and suffering is triggered by things outside of our control, right? Pain is inevitable. And pain will come when things occur outside our outside environment that is out of our control. That's how we feel pain. There's nothing we can do about it. It's happening. Suffering, on the other hand, is not the same as pain. It's truly a choice. Suffering is a choice. I know you've heard this before. And in our talk today, what we're really exploring is that suffering as a choice comes down to attachment. So I'm going to dissect a little bit this concept of what I mean by attachment. Think of it as how we connect our identity to external factors. Material attachment involves tying our sense of self to possessions and appearances. So here's a question for you around that, a little deeper exploration. How does your attachment to material possessions and appearances influence your perception of self-worth and identity? I'm going to repeat that. When we're talking about attachment, material attachment involves tying our sense of self to possessions and appearances. How does your attachment to material possessions and appearances influence your perception of self-worth and identity? Then there's personal attachment. Personal attachment revolves around seeking validation and fulfillment from others. I have a question for you to explore in relationship to personal attachment. In what ways do you notice yourself seeking validation from others in your daily interactions and relationships? And how does this impact your sense of fulfillment? In what ways do you notice yourself seeking validation from others in your daily interactions and relationships? And how does this impact your sense of fulfillment? So in other words, are you someone who requires a lot of outside validation? Are you really concerned about what people think about you? Are you moody, dependent on how others interact with you? That's a really good scale here to notice if you're clinging, if you're grasping to attachment, meaning if other people's opinions actually dictate your actions or your emotional health. That's something that happens a lot. People are in constant reactivity to how others around them speak with them, negotiate with them, if they said hello on any given day, or if they ignored them, or if they avoided them. This is a very common behavior that we see in people who have a lot of attachment to external conditions, such as what people say or think about them. And then the third piece for attachments is connected to beliefs. Beliefs attachment relates to rigidly holding onto certain perspectives or identities. So I have a question for you. Can you reflect on a time when you found yourself clinging to a particular belief or identity, despite evidence or experiences suggesting otherwise? How did this attachment affect your ability to adapt and grow? So do you believe, are you really attached to your beliefs? Do you feel that you are right and righteous in your beliefs? And you know, we all have beliefs. And here's something to notice about beliefs. Like everything else in life, they change. I can use myself as an example where my beliefs have significantly changed over the years. I used to believe certain things. I was identifying with my beliefs. Certainly when I was younger, I really felt that I was right. And my way of seeing things was the way of seeing things. So that's an attachment condition. That is a behavioral way of seeing and moving through life that can cause a lot of suffering. Do you see how the suffering comes in there? If I believe that I'm right and I am closed off to another potential perspective, I'm actually going to suffer. So to explore those attachment conditions, because unhealthy attachment occurs when we let these external factors define us. When external factors define us, it leads to fear and defensive behavior, right? Have you ever felt yourself being defensive when someone has said something to you? This happened to me just recently. Someone approached me and said something to me, and my reaction was I was defensive because I felt like they were accusing me of something. And it was a very interesting in the moment experience for me because I noticed myself getting defensive. And then I pulled all the way back and I decided to actually practice what I preach. And I calmed down and I checked in and I stopped responding. I just listened. I actively listened to what the other person was saying. And what happened in that moment is that non-attachment arose, and I was not involved from an ego perspective. Rather, I just opened my heart and I intook what the person was saying. And I said, thank you for sharing your perspective. And I'm sorry if I caused any pain by taking this action or by saying this word. And what happened is that it just loosened everything up. The person softened, I softened, and I didn't take it all so personally. That's another piece of attachment, is that it's very personal. It's about me, my feelings, my perception, what I see, what I believe. And non-attachment is an invitation to let go of our personal view on things. And I know that this might sound counterintuitive for some of you, but I have to tell you that the more you practice a relationship with non-attachment, with becoming an active listener, with having an empathetic heart, a space where we can actually listen and hear what the other person is saying, we actually become healthier, because we're not in a state of fight, flight, or freeze, and certainly not in a state of defense. So this is a lot of questions that I'm inviting you to ponder today, to tap in more deeply into how do you behave when someone approaches you, maybe with an accusatory tone or wants to be right to themselves. It's normal that a defense arises, but how do we handle that? Well, we can handle it by taking a step back and just really moving into active listening. That is very helpful to identify also if you're actually in toxic relationships. Because if you are in toxic relationships, you're going to hear it, because you have created some space between yourself and the other person. You're not in a state of defense. So you will more easily hear the toxicity occurring. So I hope this is making sense. So I want to transition into, how do we actually transition from attachment to non-attachment? What ways might we practice, might we bring into our daily practice to identify and to transition from this state of grasping attachment, just like I told you in my story, to a space of non-attachment, which is different than detachment, by the way. So we're not talking about detachment. We are talking about transitioning from grasping attachment to non-attachment. Well, one of the first ways that we can do that is to cultivate self-awareness and mindfulness. So in the way that I just shared with you, in my experience, what I just experienced recently, that someone showed up with something on their heart that they wanted to explain to me, their perspective, why this was so important to them. So as I said to you, my first reaction was to be defensive. And then as I was becoming self-aware and mindful of what was occurring, I moved back. Right in the moment, I developed a deeper understanding of my own thoughts, my own emotions, and my behaviors through this moment of self-awareness. So I was able to take a little bit of space and check in with myself as the interaction was occurring. Another way is to observe your attachment patterns without judgment. So if we have attachment patterns, the first thing we need to realize is that they're there. We have them. And we can recognize when attachments arise in this practice and then consciously choose to let go instead of clinging to external factors for validation or identity, that I'm identifying with how I am feeling, that even in that interaction, I was being defensive. So when I noticed that arose within me, again, I pulled back and I became aware and I decided I'm not going to get into an argument with this person. I'm not going to try to be right, because they had a very strong stand on what they were sharing. So instead, I decided to soften and just go, okay, I hear you. I can hear what you're saying. And just in acknowledging, right? The first of the 3 proprietary steps, the system of the Duchêne method, is to acknowledge. Just by acknowledging this person, I felt some release, some softness occur in the space. So the first piece to go from attachment to non-attachment is to cultivate self-awareness and mindfulness. The second way we can do it is to practice gratitude and contentment. And I know I have spoken about practicing gratitude ad nauseum. And here it comes again, because the practice of gratitude and personal contentment is super, super powerful. It gives us the power to shift our focus from external desires to internal contentment by cultivating a sense of gratitude for what I already have. So I recenter myself. So by becoming mindful and aware in that exchange, I actually felt grateful that I had the wherewithal, I had the mindfulness practice to create some space and not be in a state of reactivity. So practicing gratitude and contentment, making a habit of reflecting on the blessings in your life, to reflect on the blessings in your life, whether it's relationships, experiences, or very simple joys. I had such an experience last night where I was with a friend and it was just pure joy, right? To just think about that this morning makes me excited, gives me energy. So I focus on what I'm grateful for in my life. And also by appreciating the present moment and to acknowledge the abundance that you have within. If you're struggling with that, if you feel that you're empty within, I bet you there's a piece in there. There's a piece where you can tap in and really find abundance within your heart. If you have a roof over your head, if you have food on the table, you are a rich person. You have abundance. If you have friends in your life, if you're cultivating your relationships from these places, as we've been sharing all month, to cultivate love and intimacy in your relationships, not just lovers and spouses, but friends. There is something very precious about cultivating your experiences with your friends. So in this way, we can detach from cravings for more, right? Or for the fear of loss associated with material or personal attachments. So this place of feeling gratitude and contentment gives us a chance to reset our vision, reframe our minds, our thoughts, our beliefs, and to focus on what we have as opposed to what we don't have. And the third thing is to embrace impermanence and letting go. So to go from attachment to non-attachment, we might practice embracing impermanence. Isn't that the truth about life? Everything about life is impermanent. Everything changes every single day. To release our attachment, our grasp, and letting go. To recognize the transient nature of life and the inevitability of change. And you can do that by practicing to embrace impermanence, letting go of rigid expectations. Do you have rigid expectations, certain attachments to outcomes? Your need for control, it's a big one, right? Many of us have control issues. And then at the same time, if you look deeper into control, it can actually be a very positive thing. It's when you're grasping around it, when you're holding on, when you're attached to the belief of control. That's what brings suffering. So learning to release control, embrace impermanence and letting go, and to just know that change is inevitable, to live in a state where things can change very quickly and embrace that possibility, to be more open and free with that. Transitioning from attachment to non-attachment is clearly a journey of self-discovery, letting go of external definitions of ourselves and embracing who we truly are. These are very common words nowadays, to embrace who we truly are. How do we do that? Well, I've just shared 3 ways that you can do that. And to develop a deeper, more intimate relationship, first and foremost, with yourself. I hope this is making sense and that it's resonating. Let me just look at some of the chats here. Dr. Di Paola says, specifically attachment to appearances means that I depend on others for approval. 100%. So how we appear. And, at the same time, thank you, Elise, for sharing that. At the same time, it's normal, right? We want to look good. We want to feel good. And so we have some attachment to appearances. I don't want to say that it's all bad. It's just, again, when we are too attached to it, when there's a grasping around that, it really affects how we act. It affects how we act. So we are no longer truly connected to our authentic self, right? We're kind of a little bit in a performance. So to be mindful and kind as we are developing these skills of non-attachment. Dr. Paula says, I am very sensitive to others' moods and how they interact with me. Interesting. Very sensitive to others' moods and how they interact with me. So, Elise, I'm curious, this sensitivity that you feel in relationship to others' moods, does it change how you act? Does it change how you act in real time in your present life? And if so, how? How do you change in relationship to others' moods? I'm suspecting here also that, yes, there's a very high level of sensitivity. You are a sensitive person, right? You feel a lot, which relates back to another talk I did about how to protect our energetic field, right? That's in my library on YouTube. So it's a good one to explore. Sabi says, are faith and attachment connected? Sure. If you're attached to your faith and you believe that that is the faith, this is a big problem in the world today, because people believe that their faith is the faith. Having faith in itself is not necessarily an attachment. But if you believe that your faith is the faith, that's, in other words, if your faith is the right faith, right, then we are getting a little bit caught up with attachment. So if you just have faith in life, if you have faith in God and the universe, if you are someone who believes in having faith as a means to assist you to move through life with more compassion and love, well, that's not the same thing. I wouldn't say that that's an attachment. An attachment is something that's going to make you feel graspy, like you need it, you must have it. So if you're dealing with faith in this way, then maybe that has to do with attachment. You have to figure that out for yourself interiorly. If you are grasping, holding on to faith as a way to get you through life or get you through a problem, as soon as there's clinging, there's attachment there. Sabi asks, in the way that we can unconditionally have faith and are attached to it. Yeah. If you're unconditionally have faith and are attached to it. Again, anything that's going to create a sense of grasping. So if you are grasping to unconditional faith, like you're hardwired, you're absolutely unconditionally connected to faith as a means for moving through life. Notice if there's anything that seems clingy in that. If there isn't, then there's no attachment. But if you are clinging on to it, because if you have unconditional faith and you're attached to it, meaning, and if you practice it in a positive way that is supportive to you and the people you love, to how you behave and act in life, then that can be very positive. But if it's something that is stoic, so what would happen if one day your faith changed or you didn't have as much faith, right? What if something happens in life and you don't have as much faith as you used to have, for example? What would happen then? Would that become problematic for you? Because that can change. So we go back to the conversation around impermanence and change. Change happens all the time. Right now, you have unconditional faith, and that's a beautiful thing. If that supports you, that's awesome. However, living in a world of inevitable change and impermanence, right? You might change the way you relate to faith. So it's a very personal thing. You have to tap into your heart space and see if you're clinging onto it or if something that is uplifting and that supports others. Janet says, good sense and helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Janet. Nice to see you here. Yes, this is very fresh for me. Ah, yes. Okay, Elise. It changes how I feel, not always how I act. Okay, this is very important. Thank you for saying that. It changes how I feel, not always how I act. I want to challenge you a little bit with that, because when we feel something, usually our actions, even if it's slight and subtle, shifts. If there's a mood change within you, your body, your energetic body is going to shift. There is going to be a slight shift in how you act. So I just want to explore that with you and see if that might be possible. Maybe that's a little bit of a blind side where you're acknowledging that how people's moods affect you, affect how you feel, but not always how you act. The key word there is not always, so that's good, right? And at the same time, when we feel a certain way, we tend to act a certain way. It can happen. Elise continues, yes, it's about reflecting on what is mine and what is theirs and staying open while not taking on someone else's mood. Correct. So that's the energetic field, the energetic bubble. Exactly. So that you are not in a space where you are constantly in reactivity, reacting to someone else. Beautiful. Sabi says, thank you for your clarification, Anne-Marie. It makes sense. Awesome. And Elise says, agreed. Great. Thank you. These are great, great questions. Appreciate your interactivity. Okay. So just one more distinction that I wanted to bring up today. So we talked about what is non-attachment. We started today, what is non-attachment, how to transition from attachment to non-attachment. And now I want to clarify the difference between detachment and non-attachment. Detachment involves losing interest in the world around us. Detachment leads to isolation. Non-attachment, however, fosters curiosity and deeper connections without letting external circumstances define our worth. And this becomes very important when it comes to our relationships. So how does non-attachment manifest in relationships as opposed to detachment? I am not talking about detaching, becoming more isolated, removing yourself. Non-attachment is very different. In fact, non-attachment is about connecting in a very healthy and emotionally mature manner. So if we want to explore non-attachment and how that manifests in relationships, it's really about loving deeply while maintaining a sense of self-worth independent of others' opinions. So to your point, Elise, we are affected emotionally. Usually we will have a reaction, a physical reaction to an emotional affectation. And why this is important to become aware of how non-attachment can deepen and expand our relationships is because it's about maintaining that connection of self-worth without shifting who we are based on others' opinions. That is a huge skill. So for example, in a friendship, we shouldn't necessarily rely on the fact that we're a great friend to validate ourselves. If you are a great friend, it will show. It will show in your actions. It will show in how you speak, how you care for another, but not so much about calling ourselves a great friend in a way to validate ourselves. Non-attachment doesn't mean we detach from emotions or relationships. It means we detach from the notion that they define us. I'm going to repeat that. Non-attachment doesn't mean that we detach from emotions or relationships. It means we detach from the notion that they define us. So you are not defined by your emotions or relationships. Just to your point, Elise, about what you said. So it's not about external conditions. It's about internal conditions, that we can love deeply while understanding our worth comes from within, not from external validation. In this way, non-attachment empowers connection. We become more connected. And here's an example of what I mean. So imagine your child misbehaves, or a friend snubs you, or gives you the silent treatment, or is upset with you. For a parent or us, someone with unhealthy attachment, this will feel like a personal failure, right? So how someone responds or reacts to us might feel like our personal failure. But with non-attachment, when we're not attached to the outcome or to their reactivity, how they are feeling, we can respond with compassion and unconditional love, deepening our bond. Two huge tools to deepen our bonds. One is active listening. The other is empathetic understanding. Active listening and empathetic understanding will deepen your connection without having you be in a state of reactivity to how another person reacts, what they say, how they show up. So if you can just imagine, you have, your child, if you're a parent, child, or friend, and they feel distant and withdrawn somehow. Instead of jumping to conclusions or assuming what might be bothering them, you decide to deepen your bond through active listening and empathetic understanding. That means that you take some space from having to react. And reacting when we are attacked in a certain way is very normal. So I don't want to make it like we become perfect and holy and that we don't have any emotions or reactions. Of course we do. We're human. What I'm inviting you to consider here is to shift the possibility, look at it from another perspective, inducing within self this possibility for active listening and empathetic understanding. So instead of bombarding someone with questions or advice or a response, right, reacting to what they're doing, instead, you create a safe and inviting space for them to express themselves. And you might do it like this, very simply say, hey, I've noticed that you've been a little bit quiet lately. I just want you to know that I'm here for you whenever you're ready to talk. No judgment, just love. That's an example of an empathetic understanding statement, that you're not assuming why they're being a certain way. You are breaking the ice, so to speak, by saying, hey, I noticed that you're upset with me or something. I just want you to know that I'm here whenever you want to share. No judgment, just love. So this type of interaction, of course, is also a kind and wise approach in minimizing assumptions about what might be going on with the other person. And this is a skill, as you can tell. I mean, for me, certainly, right? I don't always succeed at doing this. And based on the interaction I had recently, I was reminded like, oh, wow, okay, this is a lot harder to practice, right, in real time than I remembered, because in the moment you feel attacked or surprised. And so the natural tendency is to be defensive and to react and to respond in that way. What we're practicing here are really deep skills, very deep skills of active listening and empathetic understanding. A lot of people really don't understand why these skills are so powerful, and therefore they remain in this fight, flight, freeze response. This is why we have so much more, in my opinion, so much more mental health unwellness. People are suffering from depression and anxiety because they are so concerned about what others think about them. So there is no opportunity for exchange when you are constantly focusing on yourself, about how you are feeling. Instead, when you actively listen and you open your heart to empathy, you actually can see behind the other person's eyes, behind the other person's heart, and start to dissect in the moment through awareness and mindfulness that they're actually suffering. They're suffering. And that the way they're acting with you has nothing to do with you. It's much more about themselves. So practicing these skills, right, it changes your behavior instantly for the better. Instantly, you are disconnected from being in a state of reactivity. Because when you approach a friend or anyone who might seem distant, aloof, or even angry with you, you enter from the space, from a place of genuine concern and not from a place of blame. When we get defensive, we can be blaming. It just happens because we have to protect our territory. And what I'm suggesting here is, instead of approaching it with reactivity, we practice non-attachment. Non-attachment. In the moment, you create space and you actually listen to how the other person is speaking, and it will give you a ton of information about what they are experiencing and going through. And to try to not to justify yourself in that moment, because the other person can't really hear anyways. You see what I mean? Human emotions, as you know, are deep and complex. To get along better with others and handle our feelings well, practicing non-attachment really helps. It's decide, and this is important, right? It's deciding whether we want to create calm and peace or make things more upsetting and painful. So I want to leave you with this, my friends. To practice non-attachment, ask yourself empowering questions such as, and if you have a pen and paper, I encourage you to write it down. Don't worry, I will also add them in the notes to this class on YouTube. To practice non-attachment, ask yourself empowering questions like, what would I create in my life if anything were possible? What would I create in my life if anything were possible? Number 2, what stories do I tell myself that hold me back? What stories do I tell myself that hold me back? And finally, how can I drop limiting roles and embrace new possibilities? How can I drop limiting roles and embrace new possibilities? Janet says, this feels like a really big shift for me from ingrained patterns set up from childhood. Yes, Janet, thank you. Yes, our attachment behaviors definitely come from childhood. I agree. She goes on, I have felt non-attachment and it's so good and open and love-filled for me and for them. Exactly. And then I have a few key people where space from reactivity and openness love is really hard. For sure. Me too. I totally can relate to that, right? And those are the relationships that so much need that non-attachment, because the ones that trigger us. So this is a lot of deep personal work, my friends. These are real tools. These are real life tools. If you want to be in healthy relationships, I cannot tell you how many clients that I've worked with over the years who tell me they want to be in a relationship because they want to feel better about themselves, or they break down, how that person, how they want that person to be. They have all this list of things. I've written down 46 things that I want from my partner, and I'm manifesting this person. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that per se. What I'm saying is we're human, and the less expectations we have in relationship to another person being a certain way, the more acceptance can enter the stage. can enter the scenario, right? Acceptance, full acceptance of how another person is. We're not going to change anyone. That's a really good one. If you're married or if you're in a relationship for a long time, you know very well that you can't change anyone. And we certainly don't want to be changed. So yes, I hear you, Janet. Some relationships are really hard, and those are the ones that I'm encouraging you to really explore. Sabi says, I've observed today that walking movement while pondering about a tricky situation really helps empathetic understanding. Genius, Sabi, 100%. Any type of movement, right? Very simple movement, walking, shaking the hands, shaking the body, bouncing. All of this will help you process information, the body, the mind, the heart, spirit, emotions, all connected. So thank you for saying that, Sabi. Yes, movement will help you to deepen your empathetic understanding, because you, especially if you're outside, if you take a walk outside when you're clingy or you feel attached or you feel angry about something, go for a walk outside. Like, do not respond right away, because usually we need some time to cool down and to let our body mind process. So thank you, Sabi, 100%. Go out for a walk in nature and let it flow through you. Run, move, shake. This will help you to clarify your thoughts, move emotion out of this state of reactivity, and you will come back to center in a more positive way, and perhaps be able to see the other person's perspective. And if you can't see the other person's perspective, maybe it's time to breathe them out. Maybe that you don't need to be in such close quarters with this person, right? We complicate things a whole lot. If people are aggressive or they don't feel good or their energy's off and we feel that we are in a state of reactivity around them and that we can't get through to them, get the hell out, right? Like, why do we stay in those relationships? Because we are affected by them, to your point, Elise. We feel something. Well, then that affects how we act. Like, I don't want to be an angry person. I don't want to lash out at someone else. It's so much easier for me to actually practice these skills, because when it happens in my life that someone approaches me in this way, maybe because of something I said or did, we're not perfect. I make tons of mistakes. I'm sure I say things that have upset people or might upset people. But the fact that I can be mindful about it, or certainly practice in the moment and go, you know what, let me disengage from having to be right in this exchange and just allow for the space to take care of itself by me moving out of the tension of the space and say something like, hey, I hear you. I might not agree with them, but I don't have to say that. I don't have to add fuel to the fire. I acknowledge. Step number one, acknowledge. I hear you. And if you're really practicing this, you're going to be able to say something like, I hear you, and I'm sorry if I said something that upset you. That's a big deal, because people will say, oh, you shouldn't apologize. It's not your fault. Boom, you're back into your head. You're back into the fight, flight, freeze response. Get rid of it. Get rid of your ego in those instances. Just let it go, because you're not going to change the way the other person shows up. They have a certain mindset. They have a certain way. And if you can come to resolution, if the other person is willing to participate, and they usually will be if you soften your stance. This is education, advanced education. This is not a 101 course. I just want to put it out there. So if you're having trouble with what I'm saying, what I'm sharing, if you think it's crazy because, I can't accept that another person does this. I get it. I know it's a lot of work. It's a lot of personal development work. All I'm suggesting is that you will be happier. You will be freer. You will be lighter. You will be more at peace in your heart, in your mind, in your life. And that's why I think it's important to explore these topics and to practice these skills. Elise says, it's a practice. I'll need to start practicing non-attachment too with myself. Beautiful. Yes. First and foremost, we practice non-attachment with ourselves, right? Don't be so attached to your beliefs. I know it sounds crazy. Like, what do you mean non-attachment with myself? Hey, release your attachment to your own beliefs. Open up to the possibility of another perspective from someone. So for example, in politics right now, it's nuts, right? Well, yeah, because everybody is so attached to their belief. It's always like that with politics, in my opinion, but it's really not, it's been nuts for some years now. Like COVID really like, woo, took us for a turn. These skills are even more important to develop the sense why ultimately, as a structural integration practitioner and a somatic therapist, this is my work. I can see how these practices shifts people's health, your connective tissue. If you are angry and you're right and you're pushing all the time, it dehydrates your connective tissue. You become rigid from the inside out. If you are rigid on the inside, my friends, if your heart is stuck, if your stomach is in knots, if you're not digesting properly, what do you think is going to happen in your behavior? Are you going to be free, fluid, flexible, happy, easy? No. You're going to subconsciously look for confrontation. Looking for confrontation is just as bad as avoiding confrontation, right? Those are the two extremes. So practicing non-attachment, active listening, empathetic understanding, even if you disagree, is an incredible sign of a very high emotional intelligence barrier or parameter. If you're able to practice these skills, these are difficult skills to practice. And I truly believe, I've seen it for almost 20 years of private practice, how introducing these thoughts, these ways of being in life changes us for the better, happier, healthier, physiologically healthier, more open hearts, more aligned spines, right? We feel like there's space in our chest, in our hearts, in our breathing. This is why I'm so emphatic and excited about this work, because it changes our health. And as we get older, if you're getting older with me on this call, if any of you are getting older, you will notice that when you are angry or short-sighted or rigid, if your beliefs are very rigid, you will start to feel older. Think about that. If you detach in a healthy way, right? Not to isolate, non-attachment. Let me say that again. If you practice non-attachment and you embrace connection from a place of not losing yourself, and at the same time, not being affected to change entirely by having people around you dictate how you behave or how you feel, this is the path to freedom, nirvana. Nirvana is possible, my friends. So I really, really hope that this was helpful to you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Janet says, not 101 at all, hard and so good. Yes, my friend, it is hard. These are skills to be developed over time, which is why I've been doing these lives for 1 year. 1 year, every single Monday. And I'm continuing to do these classes, except I'm changing the format a little bit, right? So as of next week, you can come here. I will be dropping a pre-recorded class. I'm changing the format a little bit, and I'll tell you why. Because I'd like to engage with you more personally. I'd like to actually, aside from reading you in the comments here, I want to see you. I want us to have a chance to interact. And so how I am shifting things, I will be dropping a pre-recorded class every Monday at 11 a.m. right here. So you can show up and listen to the class or any other time. And I'm going to be teaching a live webinar, a live class every month so that we can interact about these subjects. So I hope this is, I'm trying new things because I really want to be in more community. I want to hear you. I want to hear you live, and I want the group to be able to interact. So I'm doing my first live webinar, my class, on Wednesday, March 27th. So please mark your calendars. I hope that this is a good day, and we'll explore. If you have other days that are better for you, please let me know. I am playing with this right now. I'm trying to create a class every month where we can all come in and partake. I will have a topic. So because the topic of relationships was so popular this month, especially talking about toxicity and these topics such as non-attachment, compassion, learning to cultivate more mindfulness, more self-awareness, I'm going to be starting class, the first webinar, on Wednesday, March 27th, if I'm not mistaken, at 6:30 Eastern Time. I know that's a little bit later for my West Coast people, but I'm playing with it. So let me know if 6:30 sounds good. I know that's really late for my Europe people. I'm sorry. I'm trying to make it all work. So maybe I'll adjust the times as we move forward. Just let me know what works best for you. For now, Wednesday, March 27th, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Please mark your calendars. And I will be continuing to deepen this topic. And in fact, what I'm going to be specifically doing with these classes is to dissect how your beliefs, your thoughts, and your behavioral patterns affect your physiology. This is what I specialize in. As a structural integration practitioner, I really work with processing trauma and emotions through the body. And we're going to do this live in class. I'm not saying that I will process your trauma. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we're going to be in a Zoom environment where I will be teaching a class and you can ask live questions. We can have live interactivity more than what this platform offers. So I hope that you will join me. I will be posting about it. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for you who have been here interacting with me, showing up every Monday. You have been amazing. Thank you. It has assisted me to grow my platform and to establish better ways of doing this where I can touch more people and also have more in-depth one-on-one conversations with you. So thank you. The webinar, thanks for the question, Janet. The webinar will be anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes. I'm playing with that too. So, if you can come for an hour, that's awesome. Maybe it will be 90 minutes. It depends how many people show up and over time how it evolves. But for the beginning, it'll be anywhere. I would say probably 75 minutes is a fair time. There's enough time for me to teach and to ask questions and to make it a little bit more interactive. So thank you for being here. Thank you for having been with me for this entire year. You have been an amazing audience. I'm really grateful for you. Again, if you know anyone who might benefit from this, please invite them to join, to subscribe to my YouTube channel, ask questions. I still offer 30-minute complimentary calls if anyone wants to reach out to me because they're dealing with a specific problem related to mind-body connection. For example, if someone is having a hard time in their relationship right now, if they can't get out of a toxic relationship, they can reach out to me for a complimentary check-in and see if I might be able to support them in some way. Thank you, Elise. Merci. Looking forward to the live webinar. Awesome. I can't wait to see you there. If you have any questions, comments, please reach out to me. You can leave notes here on YouTube. And I'm really grateful for your support. I look forward to seeing you. I will be seeing you hopefully in a month on March 27th. In the meantime, you can reach out to me and just know that I will be dropping a class every Monday, 11 a.m. on my YouTube channel, and I'll be posting about it. Thank you, my friends. Thank you. Sabi says, thank you, Anne-Marie. We love you and are grateful for your precious teachings. Thank you so much. You are very kind. I love you too. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Be well, stay safe, and make good decisions. Until next time. Bye for now.